The mandate for Viksit Bharat 2047 involves re-engineering a lower middle-income economy into a fully developed nation within a single generation. Developed status is defined by a specific per capita income. This latter shows World Bank classifications, where high-income entry sits at $13,935. India occupies the lower middle-income rung at $2,700. The distance to the top represents the required transformation. Closing this gap requires following a codified, sequential roadmap over the next 20 years. By 2047, the plan targets a per capita income between $15,000 and $18,000, paired with a Human Development Index score of at least 0.80. Reaching these specific markers requires treating macroeconomic policy as an engineering problem to be reverse-solved, rather than a passive result of demographic growth. The math of this transition is precise. Reaching a $30 to $35 trillion nominal GDP requires a real growth rate of approximately 8%, compounding every year for 2 consecutive decades. The primary risk to this trajectory is the middle income trap. This occurs when rising labor costs erode a nation's edge in low-value manufacturing before it has secured the high-tech capabilities needed to compete with advanced economies. Avoiding this stagnation requires a shift in how resources are deployed, moving away from raw capital accumulation toward deep systemic efficiency. If the 8% compounding target is missed by even a narrow margin over 20 years, the economy fails to clear the high-income threshold. Structural optimization is the only path forward. India's current economic composition differs from East Asian factory-led growth. Services dominate at 55%, while manufacturing remains at 14%. By 2047, agriculture drops below 10%, while the manufacturing base expands to 32%. This involves moving a massive labor force out of agriculture and into a scaled industrial sector. The Production-Linked Incentive, or PLI scheme, is the primary policy lever driving this industrial expansion. PLI functions as a performance-based incentive. It integrates domestic production into global value chains by rewarding firms for actual manufacturing output. This graph illustrates the impact in the electronics sector, where production surged 146%. This growth transitioned India from a net importer to a major global exporter. Replicating this model across strategic industries is necessary to build the industrial base required to absorb the incoming youth workforce. However, industrial competitiveness is currently limited by high domestic logistics costs. This chart shows the margin of inefficiency. India spends 13 to 14% of its GDP on logistics, compared to the 8 to 9% benchmark of developed economies. The state's structural intervention to correct this is the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan. Gati Shakti is a GIS-based platform that integrates data from 39 ministries, allowing the government to resolve infrastructure conflicts before ground is broken. The objective is to lower the incremental capital output ratio, ensuring that capital investment translates into growth more efficiently. This visualization shows the multiplier effect. When infrastructure is coordinated, every rupee invested in the road network can yield 3.21 rupees in economic output. Sustaining an 8% growth rate depends on transforming logistics from a high-cost drag into a high-efficiency economic multiplier. High-income status also requires a shift in social metrics. India's current Human Development Index of 0.685 reflects a significant penalty caused by internal inequalities. This is driven largely by labor market failures, specifically hyperinformality and the low participation of women in the formal workforce. This chart shows the scale of untapped potential. India's female labor force participation is approximately 41%, while high-performing peers like Vietnam operate at 73%. Participation is restricted by the unequal burden of unpaid care work and a lack of formalized part-time employment structures. To address this, the government consolidated 29 archaic labor laws into 4 modernized codes. These codes introduce provisions for fixed-term employment parity, providing firms flexibility to hire while ensuring workers receive standardized benefits and Social Security. Formalizing labor and unlocking the female workforce is a prerequisite for meeting the 2047 HDI targets. India uses digital public infrastructure to leapfrog economic formalization. The JAM Trinity architecture begins with a digital identity layer. supports an integration layer for instant payments, and is topped by a delivery layer for rapid welfare distribution. This system allows the government to execute leak-proof transfers and provides a pathway for microbusinesses to access formal credit. The World Bank notes this DPI approach achieved 80% financial inclusion in 6 years, a milestone that typically takes nearly 5 decades. DPI serves as a low-cost substitute for the heavy physical capital Western nations historically used to formalize their own economies. There are clear historical precedents for rapid growth. China relied on massive state-directed capital expenditure, up to 9% of GDP, and specialized export zones. South Korea used a different model, utilizing close state-industry coordination to dominate global markets in high-tech sectors. India's diverse federal structure and democratic parameters make these top-down, authoritarian models impossible to replicate. Instead, success depends on a unique synthesis of manufacturing incentives, logistical coordination, and digital formalization to drive growth within India's specific institutional constraints. The transformation timeline is defined by specific milestones. By 2030, multidimensional poverty must fall below 7.5%, and HDI must rise to 0.75. By 2035, purchasing power parity must double to roughly $18,000 per capita to remain on track. These targets allow for no margin of error. Policy execution and resilience against global shocks must be prioritized today. Achieving developed status by 2047 remains a massive engineering challenge. Success depends on the high-precision execution of industrial scaling, capital efficiency, and the digital formalization of the labor force.